firstly, just a massive thank you to everyone for attending today and joining us for a really, hopefully, great conversation with a wonderful panel on converting student prospects and how to connect from inquiry to enrolment. And again, yeah, just another massive thank you for you all giving an hour of your time to join us and hopefully do some really, really great knowledge sharing. Next slide, please. Next. Cheers. Yeah, so first of all, I thought it was best if we kick off with some introductions. So pass on to our wonderful panel. I'll start with yourself, Babs.
Hi there, thank you. I'm Barbara Bradshaw. I'm the Senior Market Research Consultant for the Student Room, and I'm responsible for all of the externally commissioned research that we undertake for our clients, as well as much of the internal research that we carry out, including the survey findings that I'm talking about today. And I've been at the Student Room for 5 years now. Prior to that, I worked within the Research and Insight team at a university for 12 years. Thank you.
Cheers, Babs. And Jules.
Hi, I'm Jules Curtis. I am the UG Marketing Manager for UEA. I've only been in HE for 2 years. Previous to that, I was in corporate and then agency. So yeah, relatively new, but enjoying the role so far and definitely enjoying learning about HE.
Cheers, Jules. And Gethin.
Hi everyone, my name is Gethin Jones. I'm the Head of Future Student Experience at Swansea University. Been here for about 10 years, nearly 10 years, predominantly student recruitment and marketing focused. And my job is to manage all of the sort of CRM elements, applicant journey, communications, inquiry management, and also working very closely with faculty teams, subject teams, and central marketing on all interactions with students. Before that, I was in creative media, and before that, I was in civil service, so lots of different experiences.
Amazing. Cheers, Gethin. We've also got Beth, I was going to say on the call, on the webinar with us as well, who will be answering any questions that you may ask throughout the webinar. So just on a bit of housekeeping, if you do have any questions, please feel free to add them into the Q&A or into the chat, and Beth will try to answer as we go, but also sort of pick out some key ones for us and the panel to answer towards the end. Yeah, and then finally, I'm Paul. I'm the sales director here at the Student Room. This actually come up to my 10th year at TSR. Prior to that was kind of agency side again, so working with the HE. So it's a sector that I'm incredibly passionate about. Brilliant. Cool. So before we kick off and we start going into the research from Babs, the team at TSR Insight, so thought we'd start with a bit of a snapshot of how students are feeling right now and what we're seeing on the site. Again, just a bit of context over the past 60 days on the lead up to the application deadline. The Student Room tracked around 29 million page views across all areas of the site. So huge site. And just over 50% of that was in those core education areas. So that's people visiting study help, university and university courses, kind of those areas alone. The key areas that they were often looking into were personal statement, help and support, and this comes up time and time again in so much of our research and insights, something that is just deeply required from students. Questions around offer making, queries or concerns, grade boundary worries, and financial worries and money management. So while this is quite an interesting one, so in many ways it started to dissipate out of the key worries for students, but that's possibly also because it's become slightly normalized, which is an interesting one. But some of these quotes here give a really good insight into how students are currently feeling. This first one is currently the 19th, and I have made minimal progress on my UCAS statement. The reason I'm procrastinating so much is because I feel there is so much I can talk about regarding my background, but little in terms of achievements or work experience, which I feel might make my application inadequate for universities. Again, that's a classic kind of challenge that we'll see on something like the Student Room, that real fear that people have, the blank piece of paper, which is very real. Next slide, please. Cool. Again, another couple of quotes just to sort of bring that wider community feel along with this and how we see students are feeling. Top one here, does having a learning disability affect the chance to get into the top 10 Russell groups? I have ADHD and dyslexia. Do you guys think UCAS will use an AI detection tool to see if people have plagiarized in ChatGPT or other AI? That is super interesting. I remember, I just got a mild segue here. I was on a call with a university, so one of our our monthly up catch-ups, and we did a bit of a poll on ChatGPT and how it was used for personal statements. And this guy said that he created a personal statement for law and showed it to an admissions person and said, would I get in? And I was like, well, it's not great, but probably actually yes. And it had taken 30 seconds of input into ChatGPT to then go and create that output, which I found mega interesting. So we'll see what happens on that one. Anyway, next slide, please, Vicky. Cool. So the student room, it's home to thousands of conversations between students every year. Yeah, the examples that we've gone through give you an idea of what those conversations look like and how students are feeling. But what we're going to do now is we're going to start moving into the main bit of research from Babs. But I want to kick off with a question for the panel. So one to you, Gethin, if possible. When it comes to cost of living, which we alluded to earlier as one of those primary concerns, what kind of initiatives does your university have for students either before they start or when they come to university to try to support them with financial constraints?
Thanks, Paul. And yeah, just to go back to the point you made earlier about the normalization of that kind of cost of living perspectives, I think that's true. I think we're all sort of seeing it in the media and the news all the time, so it's becoming part of the sort of common syntax, if you like. Like, I've got two kids who are in university. One is in Liverpool, one's in Swansea with me at the moment. Not with me directly, but yeah, she's studying at Swansea. They wish they'd had more input in terms of like how to do student finance, how to apply for accommodation, what do I need to do for deposits and stuff like that. So they don't teach it in schools, unfortunately. They might do to a certain extent, but the parents' influence, I suppose, to point out, is really, really important in all of this. We've got a different track for parents in terms of comms to invite them to online sessions and events to support them with some of the complexities so they can pass that on to their kids as well. But also to play to your strengths and know what's happening in your city, in your region, your university. Is it cheaper really compared to other cities? Can you use some insights to actually provide some tangible examples to the audiences? Web page specifics are an obvious one. You've got to make sure that they're up to date and factual and correct, but we've got quite a good focus on content, content marketing, that social, Insta, TikTok friendly insights from our content creators that really kind of lands a bit better for that relatable and authentic reflection. So beforehand, it's mainly to do with those things for us at Swansea, and then loads of stuff after arrival. Then so we've got a dedicated money advice team. We've got lots of stuff happening with the student union, and obviously as time goes on, there's more promotional discounted options on campus in terms of retail and food outlets and stuff as well. So quite a lot going on at Swansea. Yeah,
brilliant. Just on the just picking up, obviously with Swansea being it's a slightly lower cost of living area than, let's say, London or the southeast. Yeah. We'll talk later on about sort of comms and particularly sort of like CRM. But do you do anything where, if an applicant is from London or the southeast, that kind of cost of living message is amplified to those people where it might hit harder, I guess?
Yeah, I think we do that in part, and again, it comes down to segmentation and how you utilize the data within the CRM. In terms of like interactions and on-campus visits, those are conversations we have all the time. And in briefings with ambassadors and teams and stuff, we need to know who the audience is that's going to arrive on the day, and then we can prep with the right messaging for those particular audiences then. But yeah, it's something that we're developing, and that hyper segmentation, personalization element, or at least developing it on a regional perspective, is something we're really focusing on now as well.
Yeah, amazing. Cheers, Gethin. And Babs, over to you.
Thank you. So moving on to our survey results now. We've been collecting the majority of the survey findings that I'm going to talk about since the beginning of the academic year using our monthly TSR Ask survey with prospective students. We've concentrated this presentation on two stages of the decision-making process. Firstly, inquiry to application, where we'll be looking at research findings from 2024 and 2025 entry prospective undergraduates that we surveyed in November and December. And then we'll move on to applicant and enrolment information. And for that element of the presentation, we also spoke to 2023 entry students before they enrolled in September and asked them to reflect back on their experiences as they went through the application process. So first off, inquiry to applicant, and we start off at the beginning of the application cycle with 2025 entry prospective undergraduates. So typically year 12, right at the start of their application journey. So we asked what information they would want from universities. We gave them a long list of options, and almost all, so 98%, did want information from universities right at the start of year 12. And they wanted a lot of different things. On average, each selected 6 different options from the list. Topping the list, as we might expect, 91% wanted course information. So things like the module information, the entry requirements, and so on. 80%, so 4 out of 5, wanted information about the university. So things like facilities, support, and the student union. And also important and wanted by 4/5 of these 2025 entry respondents was application and personal statement guidance. So even at this very early stage, they want to know what they need to do to apply and what they need to put on their personal statements. And this time last year, we surveyed prospective undergraduates about personal statements. 96% were concerned about this part of the application process, and many were feeling really stressed about it. The main thing they worried about was making their personal statement stand out. So anything universities can provide early on to help 2025 entry students with this might be helpful. So hints and tips on how to structure their personal statement, advice on what to include or what to avoid, and also how your university will use them in the offer making process will all help to make your university stand out as providing useful support information to applicants. Going back to the chart, accommodation information is important early on, and so is information about open days and tours. And we saw in research that we published in September this year that the majority of 2025 entry respondents were only planning to attend up to 3 on-campus open days in total. So again, it's important to make sure open day information is easily accessible to ensure your university is one of those that they do decide to attend. Information about the city or the campus was also wanted by 72%. And this is how you bring in that vibe element and make participants really feel something about the place they'll call home for the next few years. So for some, the location's a USP, it's an easy thing to talk about in your marketing, but for others, it's more of a challenge, although students really do still need to hear about it. And of course, for almost 2/3, 64% wanted to know how to fund their studies. And among those who were the first generation in their families to go to university, this was even higher at 73%, compared to just 58% of those whose parents had been to university. Paul?
Brilliant, thanks, Babs. Yeah, one of the stats that jumps out there is about 72% looking for information about the city and campus, which can be particularly difficult when you're trying to blend things like open days and virtual open days. So I guess again, a question for the panel. Maybe again, I'll come again to you, Gethin. In terms of that particular bit of information, with 72% of students saying they want information about the city, what do you do at Swansea to help communicate around this type of topic?
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, and go back to Bab's comment about, each university and the location is going to be different, and you really need to know, what's your regional perspective, what's your geographical perspective, what are your actual selling points? That's going to be different, and it will be on some students' radar already if it's a familiar city, if they've got a family, or if they've got links and friends and stuff, that they've been on holiday. But you really need to know that, I feel, and any content in the comms then in terms of what's going on in the city, what's in development, what relates to the younger audiences, what kind of community elements are happening in the city that youngsters can get involved in, what are the sporting elements as well. And also the people and the personalities. In Swansea, we're very lucky, we've got a friendly community, quite a diverse backgrounds community, a lot of international students as well. How can you tap into some of that community feel and vibe, as Bab said, to try and get that across in the comms then. But it's similar to the cost of living stuff. We've got that social friendly content marketing piece, and we sort of take them around the city, and we've got very beautiful beaches and landscapes and mountains on the doorstep and stuff. So we've got loads that at our disposal to try and turn that into storytelling, you know. And again, each city and each university will have a different palette to draw from. Then, you know, I would say open days are absolutely critical, though. If you can get applicants to open days, they will get a much better tangible feel for things. So that's something that we really try and focus on, trying to get them to the open days.
Yeah. When that isn't possible, do you do anything on the virtual front to try to get that city feel or vibe across?
Yeah, we do a series of online sessions, webinar insights, you know, sometimes student-led, sometimes led by staff teams as well. We trialed elements about doing stuff on location in the past, but obviously that comes, you know, with specific challenges. So then we do have some great digital content and, you know, drone shots to give a bit more aspect of where we are as a city as well.
Yeah, amazing. Nice one. Cheers for that.
Thank you. So even though these are potential 2025 entry applicants, it's not a guarantee that they'll definitely apply for university. Almost all, so 95%, had concerns about going to university. And you can see here the top 5 reservations that 2025 entry students selected at the time of the survey. So making the right university choice was top of the list of things they were worried about. Around half were worried about choosing a course they would enjoy. So these are big decisions that they want to get them right. As well as making the right choices, as we saw last year, cost of living while at university remains high on the list at 57%, although slightly down versus last year when 2/3 of respondents were telling us that they were worried about it. And among these top 5, 2 more of these top responses are linked to finance, so with concerns about future employability and repaying their student loans appearing high on the list. And it's worth saying that we gave a long list of students to select from here. So not to scare them, but because we wanted to properly understand which of these areas were the most pressing concerns and could be barriers to their application and their entry to HE. On average, each selected 5 things that they were concerned about. So that's a lot of things preying on their minds about the decision to enter higher education, and a lot of things that might ultimately make them question the decision to study. And with 3 of the 5 main concerns about university being linked to finance, it's still a really huge area for us as a sector to address, along with those reassurances that they're making the right choice. Can we move on to, thank you. So now moving on in the decision-making timeline to those who are planning to go to university this September. So our 2024 entry cohort, predominantly those in year 13. We initially delivered this presentation at the HELOA National Conference last month, and this question was kindly provided by HELOA members in advance. And it focuses on the details that prospective students wanted to know about an individual university before applying there. So when they're really at the point of narrowing down their choices and filling out their UCAS form. And these students quite understandably had a number of factors that they considered essential, on average each selecting around 6 options each from the multiple choice list. And at this point of the decision-making cycle, prior to applications, the highest proportion of students wanted to know about student satisfaction. They want to know that the people currently at the university are having a good time there and they're satisfied with their learning. And this is where all the great work universities do supporting current students helps to promote the university through student satisfaction scores and positive word-of-mouth recommendations. Accommodation is also important, and among those planning to move away, accommodation understandably was more likely to be important at 73%, which means for students planning to move away for university, this then became the highest factor in their decision making. But those students planning to stay at home for university also have specific needs. 71% wanted to know about the transport links, making this the most important thing stay-at-home students wanted to know about a university before applying. So for universities with a high level of local recruitment in particular, is this information you're providing to students planning to stay at home? So these are the students who will be having to pay to commute to campus each day, and many of whom will be particularly cost conscious. Making sure that information about travel and commuting is available is also important. And again, providing that support to commuter students will lead to positive word of mouth locally and hopefully retention of this cohort. Course structure and flexibility is also among the top 3 there, with 60% citing this as an essential to know before choosing to apply to university. We saw earlier at the start of the recruitment cycle, respondents were concerned about choosing the right course for them, and getting the detail of how the course will work and what flexibility they will have within that is essential. Information about the city or local area again, was wanted by almost 3/5. So it's still important to portray the vibe of the university throughout. Lower down the list, but something we see repeatedly wanted by prospective students, is information about student support services. 43% sought that information before application. And as we'll see in a moment, this increases when choosing firm choice. Paul?
Great, thanks, Babs. Yeah, another question for the panel. I found that stat around. Do you mind jumping back a slide, Vicky? Just around that significant swing, particularly with transport links, when you're looking at move away students versus stay at home students. And Babs, you mentioned a couple of points, is that possibly so first in family, kind of going to university, and there's probably other socioeconomic challenges that sort of might be faced. So yeah, for the panel, and again, it comes to you, Gethin. How do you support those applicants who are living at home during uni?
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, and again, with us, Swansea specifically, in terms of our location and aspects, we're a campus, we've got 2 campus locations, so self-contained campus university. We don't necessarily have the need for students to travel across the city to go to different places and stuff, so that in itself maybe changes the perspectives a little bit. I think it depends. If we're talking like the surveys looking at before applying to university, an immediate challenge is, well, how do we identify those students if they haven't applied yet? And there's a segmentation challenge there as well. Obviously clear information on web pages specific to any data insights and stuff, exactly like the student room's talking about today. But in terms of post application, once we've got their details and we can identify those characteristics, we use a couple of things like towards the post application stage. If I'm honest, things like we've got an app for arrivals and then pre-arrivals, and then it converts into a current student app, so they've got quick access to transport information and location and all those things that come with it as well. And we also use other tools like Unibuddy Community, for example, to invite applicants, offer holders to meet with others and maybe join groups that discuss different themes, like, for example, people who might be living at home, and then they can meet each other and ask questions if you're part of that community as well, and provide updates before they arrive too. Jules, did you have anything to input here as well? Because we chatted about this briefly yesterday, didn't we, I think?
Yeah, I think it's, again, obviously where Norwich is based as well, we often do have, people that might commute an hour or two. And again, we do similar things that once they arrive, we're able to kind of put those people together potentially for like ride sharing or lift sharing, as well as giving them information that really helps to support their journey into the university, because obviously we have quite a wide local area as well. But similar things, putting them in groups once they become applicants, or in the transition emails, we talk about, general transport in, as well as those who are local to those who are further afield. But we're campus based as well, so everything at UEA is all in one place, so we don't have any other campuses bar the media side that might be in the city, but everybody will live on campus and be in that area, so it makes it quite easy for those who are on campus. As soon as they arrive, everything's there.
Brilliant. I think it goes back to something you mentioned earlier, Gethin, but we've seen in some previous research, is that students really want to see the lid lifted on the hidden costs of university, and often that can be in things like transport, parking on campus, wherever it might be. How much does that all add up to? Particularly if you're a very cost-conscious student, it can make a big difference to know that in advance.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's really important to include those elements. What is that actually going to mean in practice? And what does it actually mean in practice in Swansea compared to UEA, compared to another university as well? It's good for them to make those decisions, because that's quite often, especially from a parent's perspective, if it's going to cost them less for bus passes or season tickets for rail cards and stuff, then it makes a massive difference across 3 years, then 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, brilliant. Babs.
Thank you. So now moving on to the stage from application to enrolment, and first we'll look at 2024 entry students and how they think they'll make their decisions. And later in this section, we also included research with current 2023 entry students, asking them to reflect back on their decision making. So looking at the same list as before provided by HELOA members, we asked 2024 entry students what they thought it was essential to know about university before they selected it as their firm choice. And again, there was a lot that was considered essential. Each selected an average of 5 options from this list. Accommodation topped the chart, and unsurprisingly, among those planning to move away, this was even higher. 62% felt accommodation information was essential in their firm choice. Lower in the list, nightlife was also more likely to be considered essential to those planning to move away. So 37% thought this was essential compared to 19% of those planning to stay at home. And that could be because stay-at-home students already know what the nightlife is like in their university time. It may suggest that stay-at-home students have other interests, or that they aren't necessarily likely to engage as much with the social side of university to the same extent. Stay-at-home students were also less likely than those planning to move away to think that sports and societies were essential in their firm choice decision-making. Whereas 57% of stay-at-home students said the student support services were essential, and that was actually the top factor for these students compared to just 45% of move-away students. So anecdotally, we know that attrition can be high among stay-at-home students. So making sure that the support available both on campus and online is well signposted for all students, particularly commuting students, may be helpful, as well as promoting opportunities to engage with extracurricular activities such as clubs and societies, and making sure these are accessible to those who are commuting. You know, not everything being held at night if they've got to travel on their own, for example. That might help them feel part of the community. Student satisfaction is still important here, with half saying this was essential at this later point in the decision-making cycle. So moving on to communicating with prospective students at this point from application to enrolment now. Thank you. First, we asked an open question to 2023 entry students asking about what they would have found useful from universities after accepting their firm choice. Comments were varied, but focused around 3 key themes. So the provision of regular, timely and useful information relating mainly to logistics, issues such as enrolment and key dates, timings of what they need to do and when and how things work, what they need to do both initially when they're signing up and enrolling and day to day, including general university life information and also course related information. So course content and structure, assignments, assessments, etc. They also wanted more detailed insight into the university environment, particularly the local area and the accommodation on offer, the campus and travel around the city. And they wanted information on how to connect with other students. And we've got some open comments here from the survey. Go to the next slide, please, thank you. Where you can see some of the details from students themselves. And the one on detail of what accommodation comes with is really interesting. Money's tight, so they want to know how much they need to buy or bring and what is provided to them in their accommodation.
Great, thanks, Babs. On that note, bring a question to yourself, Jules. So 2023 entry undergrad said they would like to have more information on connecting with other students after selecting their firm choice. What is it you do at UEA to help facilitate these prospective students connect with other either current or prospective students prior to results day and then after results day?
Yeah, so we have a couple of kind of social groups that we might do. Obviously, we have our students on your TSR forum to answer any questions that might be on there regarding their application or coming to UEA. We also then have a Unibuddy group. So we want to make sure that everybody who's coming feels like they have a safe space, and our students are on there, our academics are on there as well, in order to answer any questions. And then obviously there's the social groups like the Facebook group as well. And it's really just a space for those applicants to come in and kind of feel like they can get their questions answered. And often what happens is they come in, they make their own groups and they kind of go away. They go, oh, I'm studying this. And so they form another group, or I'm staying in this accommodation. And they all kind of start to organize themselves, which is really nice. But it's important that that group feels kind of like it's monitored and it's safe, and it has people in there that they feel kind of a welcome straight away. And so that's one of the biggest things that we want to make sure we do when we're trying to get students to turn up in September.
Brilliant. Cheers, Jules. Gethin, is there anything you want to add to that as well?
Similar approach, really, and I think that community element, or I think there's a question in the chat that we'll come to later about a sense of belonging. I think that's super important, especially you know, if they've visited and we're in the mix and you know they like the location and the place, they also want a sense of, well, who am I going to be sat next to? Who am I going to be able to make friends with? You know, so it's a really important emotional part of that journey. I think, yeah, there's not, you know, in terms of, I think I was going to come on to later as well, and you know, the tone and the messaging and how we approach, you know, relatable content and copywriting and stuff for audiences is also super important, you know. But yeah, I think what Jules summarised there was brilliant, actually.
Yeah, brilliant. It's really interesting on the community side of things because generally speaking, the trend with social media platforms is that they are making a lot more money, but their engagement is falling off a cliff. So like as far as posting levels, just because, you know, Facebook was designed as the town hall, right? You know, the town square, but now it's predominantly just algorithmically served content. Is very little but actually from your peers and people you probably actually want to hear about. So there's a huge drift from social platforms into closed community platforms. So yeah, what you're doing with obviously Udemy community, the student room. It doesn't surprise me, Jules, when you talk about sort of people going off and then creating their own sort of sub WhatsApp groups, those own closed communities. It's,
But I think the thing about these community groups is they're hearing from the students. So predominantly the students are kind of managing that, and they can kind of go, oh, I can chat to someone who's on law or medicine or, you know, any of those courses. And I think they'll just feel a bit better about it to be able to speak to those peers.
Yeah, and they're becoming so much more, you know, savvy, more than ever before. Like every year, every month, you know, any type of tone that's related to machine learning, AI, ChatGPT, you know, the algorithm is becoming more noticeable to the younger audiences. You know, so they just need that you know, the realism, the authenticity, even if it's not pretty. You know, they know exactly what it's like, and they can understand, or they can decide whether they want to manage with the rough and the smooth, you know.
Yeah, so true. Perhaps.
Thank you. So we asked 2023 entry students how they wanted to hear from their chosen universities at the different stages in the process. We looked at 3 stages: after receiving an offer, but before they'd selected their firm choice; after they'd selected their firm choice, but before results day; and after results day, but before they started university. And overwhelmingly at each stage, they wanted to receive emails from universities. Almost all, so 95 or 96% selected emails from the list at each stage. They wanted to have the information they needed in their inbox where they could find it if and when they needed it. Social media was also really important, either second or third on their list at each stage. And there was also an appetite for applicant websites, particularly between results day and enrolment, when almost half, 46%, wanted information via an applicant website. And these are applicant websites in particular involve more proactivity from prospective students. They have to sign up, and that's perhaps something they're more likely to do after they've decided their firm offer, or they have their place confirmed. So it's really interesting to see that was of interest then.
I frantically find my mute button. Yeah, I find this really interesting, particularly on sort of like the use of email. I remember a former colleague of mine, literally 10 years ago, describing email as the cockroach of the internet, and 10 years later, I think that's still probably true. But it also ties in so much with what UCAS have been talking about recently with Carl Campbell around. Yeah, from a service level perspective in particular, so email is still super important. But yeah, a question for yourself, Jules. How do you tap your frequency and type of comms to change where a student is in the cycle? And I guess a second part of that is there anything we can learn from commercial subscription organizations? For example, how a newspaper you might sign up for, like I said, The Guardian, and they'll do daily briefings as well as weekly deep dives.
Yeah, I think you know, from a kind of student journey, you can kind of map out the things that they might want. So even if you think about starting in March or to the January deadline, you can kind of know what the content is that you want to share with them. However, you just don't know when they're going to drop in to your journey, right? So you have to go, okay, well, here's the key things I really want them to know about, but I'm really not sure where they'll where they'll jump in. So depending on where they are in that cycle, you might have to really condense stuff that potentially you might have done one email about, because you go, okay, they've dropped in really in a short space of time, but we kind of want them to know all these things about UEA that's really important to them to make a decision by the application deadline date. So I think those bite sizes do happen within our comms. And we also, we don't want to overload people with a whole load of emails as well. So we're very cautious of making sure that the content that we have is the right content at the right time and in the format that we know is best. And that's a good thing about CRM. You can test those things because you've got that longer journey and you can see people who started at the top and those that came in a shorter time and kind of what was that engagement based on. So I think there's definitely learnings with CRM that you can start to do, which is good.
Amazing. Cheers, Jules.
Thank you. So next we asked about how often they would like contact from universities at those same stages in the process. So the first chart there is after receiving an offer, but before they'd selected their firm choice. The middle one's after they'd selected their firm choice, but before results day. And the third one is after results day, but before they started university. And the frequency goes from every few days to once a month and then less often. And it seems they're open to regular contact at each stage, and that the regularity increases as they get closer to enrolment. So looking at the first set of data, initially after application and prior to accepting a university as their firm choice, more than a third, so 36%, wanted contact at least once a week, either every few days or weekly, those first two bars there. And the most commonly selected frequency was every few weeks at 41%. After selecting firm choice, but before results day, we can see an increased interest in more regular communication, with more than 3/4, so 76%, wanting contact from universities either once a week or every few weeks, the middle two bars in that middle chart. And then looking at the third chart after results day, once they've confirmed their place, the frequency that they wanted contact with their university increased again. So 41% wanted contact with their university every few days. And in total, 82% wanted contact at least weekly during this period before enrolment. So they are open from hearing from universities regularly throughout the process, and they want information to help them settle in and know what they need to do and where they need to be.
Thanks, Babs. Yeah, I find the change in this so stark and really interesting. However, there probably realistically is a bit of a disconnect between the amount of emails and comms that our respondents are saying they want and how much they actually then go and open and engage with the comms that's sent out. And in a moment, we'll see that 2023 entry students advise future students to very much stay on top of their comms, which suggests that they themselves quite possibly hadn't. But yeah, question for you, Gethin. What are the way your university is managing getting the key information to students in a way that they will engage with? And I guess partly from this is like, are there any real wins, but also any kind of learnings of things that haven't had cut through?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And again, if I'm honest, a constant work in progress. Every year we sort of need to review this and look at what the audiences are doing, what's landing, what's not. It's not surprising to see the sentiment or the perceptions around the more frequent comms as you get down the applicant journey. Again, I probably agree, and maybe a little bit of health warnings to the genuine expectations. But I would say too much information is another consideration as well. You need to be really mindful of, and we don't want to overwhelm applicants with lots of detailed, complex information because that can be really overwhelming. They need it in a digestible format, in language that they understand and they can relate to. So I think the student voice or the current student voice is useful for that as well. In terms of interactions we mentioned before and that peer review piece. And the copywriting element, I think this is so important and something that we're not perfect by any means, but something that we try and focus a bit more on. What language resonates best with audiences, what are the best ways, timings, headers, subject lines that are going to relate to those important calls to action that are needed at specific deadlines and key dates that we want them to take action, and what is the other more maybe extracurricular experiential information that we want them to take note of, but they don't need to respond straight away. So it's a balance, and I would say the graph kind of agrees with what kind of happens, I'd imagine, whether in Swansea and most other institutions as well. But I would maybe focus on, well, what is the important information and how do we frame that in the best way to get them to engage rather than just piling loads of information on them all the time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Jules,
I think yeah, so I think on that note as well, I think the advancement of technology is certainly helping us in that area, in the sense of you now can see, did they open it? If that information is really important, then you resend it, right? You can resend it in the next couple of days. You can also kind of look at the key times in which you know your applicants are likely to open those emails. So that send time optimization as well is really just going to help to get it in front of them so they actually do engage with it. So you want those engagement rates to be going up. SMS, the developer that, and WhatsApp and everything else. You have the right data from the students, you can potentially get those engagement rates up enough and be on a platform that they're going to engage with. I think is key, particularly when they're about to turn up for university. So in that transition stage where there is key things that you need them to really know that they've got that, because the chances are, you probably did send, a lot of these universities probably did send all that information to those 24 students, but it just didn't cut through, because it's unlikely that a university wouldn't have sent that information because it's so important for them to have before they do the first day. So the question was, why didn't it cut through and why didn't they see those emails? So I think the advancement technology, that really is an ability for us to gauge that as a university and say, well, we just need that engagement rate to be more, so that we know, 60-70% of the students are actually engaging with the right content for them to turn up in September and feel like they feel welcomed.
Yeah, brilliant. The last stage in particular is so important, because as marketeers, you work, in 2, sometimes 3-year cycles to ensure the funnel is continuously filled at the top, and you want to make sure the landing is stuck at the end in that transition from results day to that first day on campus. Babs.
Thank you. So did the 2023 entry students we surveyed get the information they needed, or notice the information they needed, perhaps? We asked them to think back to the time that after they had that confirmation of their place at university, so after results day, and asked whether their university provided information in good time. And there's some really positive stats here, and many said they'd received course start dates, their welcome week schedule, and perhaps most importantly, what to bring with them to enrolment in good time. However, only around half said they'd received basics like a campus map or information about where to go on the first day in good time. And these obviously are important details that will help them feel settled and like they belong. Helping students staying in a new place for the first time find their way to campus and around it is important, obviously. Stay-at-home students might need advice on which welcome week activities they need to commute to campus for and which are optional. Similarly, course-specific information such as the timetable and reading lists, and practical information like how to use the library had only been received in good time by around half. With the current cost of living meaning many students need to work alongside their study, providing the timetable in good time so they can plan work and commuting or childcare around it, and sending reading lists early so they can source second-hand copies or spread the costs are little steps universities can take to support students at this time. And so in another open question, we asked 2023 entry students what advice they would give to students in the year below about applying for university next year. And surprisingly, given how regularly they wanted contact, the main piece of advice was about staying on top of all the different communications. So this was both about making sure key dates and deadlines weren't missed, and also about not missing other key information, so things they had to take with them, that kind of thing. Perhaps obviously repeating essential information with some clearly marked reminder emails might be helpful there. They also urged younger students to do lots of research, to attend open days, and to choose a university that was right for them regardless of the rankings. They advised students to be open to new experiences and to try new things, to take the opportunities that are offered at their new university. And the comments were really positive and generally very supportive to their younger peers. A consistent theme which ran through the commitments was reassurance, not to worry, things would work out and everything would be okay. And in the open comments of the survey, you can see some of the details from students themselves. So don't ignore university emails. Go to the open days so that you can really get a feel for the area. Throw yourself into everything from the start and enjoy the experience to the fullest. So still with 2023 entry applicants, we asked what had been the single most influential information source when choosing a university to go to. And perhaps unsurprisingly, university websites, open days and applicant days were the most frequently mentioned. In total, 39% mentioned visit days either before or after application. So I'll just finish up with a couple of slides about applicant days, as we know this is a topic of interest at the moment. So we explained that applicant visit days are when prospective students are invited to visit a university after they've applied and received an offer, and that they tend to be specific to the subject applied to. Half of 2024 entry respondents that we surveyed planned to attend either 2 or 3 applicant visit days. Just 9% said they would attend all 5, and 18%, so almost 1 in 5, weren't planning to attend any. And while this appears low, in January 2023, when we served 2023 entry students, 30% didn't plan to attend any. So there is a year-on-year increase in attendance or perceived attendance. And when Paul and I discussed this topic at Helloa last year, there was lots of debate about the different terminology used around applicant days and offer holder days, with many of the universities in the room using different terms for the same events. And so if we, thank you. So we asked our audience of prospective students what they referred to them as. Respondents were most likely to be familiar with the terms offer holder day and applicant day, and they were least likely to have heard of invitation day. Next slide, thank you. And at offer holder days, there was lots of things that they wanted to find out about. So from a long list of options, each selected on average 5 different things that they would find useful. But primarily, they wanted to hear directly from the people there and also to take tours. So topping the list was hearing from current students on the course they would be studying, and also hearing from the lecturers about the course. So both at 70%. They also wanted to hear about from students about university life. Among students who were the first in their families to go to university, 79% wanted to hear from the lecturer on their course. Tours of the campus, and in particular for those moving away, accommodation tours are still important at this stage. 74% of those moving away wanted an accommodation tour at an applicant day. And this is just applicant day, so something perhaps to think about those courses which interview. Are students attending interviews rather than applicant days getting a chance to tour the accommodation and the campus? At this point in the cycle, they've checked out all the course details. They know on paper that the course will meet their needs. They want to hear from the people studying it and teaching it firsthand. And they also want to know what the university environment will be like that they will be studying in. So thinking back to those important factors when choosing firm choice, so accommodation, student satisfaction were top things they wanted to know about. And this is where they get those details. This is where they learn about the vibe of the university and whether they'll fit in. And talking to current students and getting their opinions was essential. Paul?
Thanks, Babs. Yes, on applicant days, a question for yourself, Jules. What initiatives, or are there any initiatives that you have on getting students to attend applicant days?
So we obviously will provide a travel fund for those people that require it in order to attend the applicant day. But generally, our communication is around the value of coming to those applicant days, being able to talk to the lecturers, the students, to come and see the accommodation, you know, to really get a feel of kind of what your life would be like at UEA. And so via those communications, we generally get a good uptake of people attending the applicant days, because they understand that actually they'll get like those questions there, right? They'll get a subject talk, they'll speak to a professor, they'll get a campus tour, they'll go and see the accommodation, and they'll talk to our ambassador students at the applicant day. So it kind of ticks all those 5 elements when we kind of sending out that communications to them. We're very clear that that's what we want them to do, and we want them to make that decision and come and see that it's a right fit for them.
Yeah. Cheers, Jules. Gethin, anything you'd like to add around applicant days?
We've got a slightly different approach to Swansea, and we've had for the last few years, in that we don't necessarily brand or frame them as applicant days or offer holder days. So we have open days throughout the year, and in the spring, then post UCAS deadline, we kind of pivot the content of those events more aimed towards our offer holders. Then we tried it a few different ways. There's obviously value in an offer holder day, applicant day experience, but we also would like to encourage those that are maybe early researchers and awareness to create that vibe on campus. We can maybe put on more provision for students and make it a bit more of an atmosphere. But in terms of encouraging them to attend, you know, we do a few things. We're just about to embark on call campaign over the next few weeks now to try and reach out to students, to give them insights in what to expect, and insights from current students as well, from what the sessions will involve, and the course content and accommodation options and stuff like that. And we've looked at incentives. Again, it depends on the city, the university, and the aspect really. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. It's a bit of trial and error. But in terms of reminders and the appropriate channels, and we use SMS a lot in terms of applications and registering details and stuff. So yeah, we should have some busy events through the spring. But again, Swansea's approach is probably a little bit different compared to others.
Amazing. Cheers, Gethin. Babs, back to you.
Thank you. And so finally, from me, student recommendation and support is essential at every stage of the decision-making process. So we asked about all the different stages in the journey when they would seek support from peers, such as university students, either in person or online, starting from when they're first considering going to university, then when shortlisting, and so on, right up to after they've confirmed their place at university. And there was an interest in peer-to-peer support at every stage, most often for researching those big decisions, so deciding where to apply at 46%, and after receiving an offer when they're trying to decide on their firm choice at 43%. But also when they're initially shortlisting and making those firm and insurance choices. And even after the decisions have been made and confirmed, 28% were seeking peer-to-peer support after results day and before enrolment. So your students are your best ambassadors, and providing any opportunities for applicants to connect with current students can showcase your university and aid conversion. Thank you. Paul?
Cheers. Yeah, just a couple of key takeaways before we move on to some questions. I think there's some really great ones in there. Yeah, so universities are doing a lot of great things and a lot of things really right in supporting students, and students are clearly getting the essentials from them. But yeah, is there scope to provide more support and information about opportunities, particularly when it comes to engaging with current students, as this may help to alleviate a lot of the concerns that they may have. There's also scope to keep in touch more regularly, particularly after results day, and to ensure that that final transition from, particularly when it comes to year 13s, from school to university is really on point, and to help them settle in. And finally, applicant days aren't a given. Most won't attend all 5, and a lot won't attend any. So for those who do attend, it's really important that it's all about the personal connection with both people and place. So those students get a real chance to be other students, take on the vibe of the city, meet their lecturers, really understand sort of fully their course. So if possible, try to link applicants with others joining their course or current students to really help them feel a part of your university community before they arrive, and help them settle in. Brilliant. So thank you all, and yeah, let's go to the questions. Beth, should we go to you? Question master. I think we can't hear you, Beth, for some reason.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Sorry about that. Do you feel, for you, Paul, do you feel like the feeling of belonging needs addressing at the beginning of the pipeline, or do you think that's something that can be left for conversion work?
Yeah, great question. I think so. A lot of this stuff should be brought in as early as possible, and kind of universities are really considered purchase, and that brand needs to be built over a long time, not just a single point in time, like clearing as an example. And that feeling of belonging should be associated with that kind of that longer term brand build. So if there is a way of creating that amongst sort of year 12s, through your outreach teams, through creating those linkages much earlier on, then I think it's well worth doing. The biggest challenge, and I think Jules, we spoke about this before, when it comes to sort of lots of things within higher education, there's so much that can be done, but doesn't necessarily mean there's always the resource to be able to do those things. So yeah, I think it does stretch, much further beyond than just the sort of the end of the applicant journey, but it's harder to do it earlier.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have anything else to add on that?
I think on some of that sense of belonging is really just pulling on your social media team, you know, by having the authentic students talk about stuff, and whether or not you can kind of look at using that content that's already out there potentially, that has been used by your students on those social platforms, for then to be used in those communications to say, hey, look, this is kind of what our students are already doing, so they feel like they see themselves in that. And I think social media is a great way of getting that kind of authentic voice out.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a way of making that authentic. And I do like what you said as well about the social media teams. So another question. So one attendee said they'd be interested to hear more about engagement with parents and carers. So whether that's communicating with parents from the lead stage or focusing on the parents and carers of offer holders.
I can give some insight on that. So from a Swansea perspective, I think I mentioned earlier, we've got specific content aimed at the parent audiences and influencers, you know, not just parents and guardians, but anybody closely related to the applicant. That spans across all kinds of interactions, you know, content within open days and in-person interactions. We do online sessions, webinars throughout the cycle as well. We did one, I think, just this week, actually, which was really, really well attended. And obviously, developing the content and the messages more aligned to the needs and motivations of the parents, but also helping the parents understand the process and the complexities of that UCAS journey. And, you know, some may not have had children go to university in the past, and it's a very sort of inclusive and supportive environment as well. Then, does that answer the question?
Yeah,
Beth? Yeah.
definitely. Thank you. Yeah, we've done research, a summary with parents in the past, and we found there is a lot of appetite from prospective students to have parent-focused information provided to them as well. Do you have anything to add on that, Babs?
Yeah, similar to what you say, I think parents have perhaps more of an influence than they might give themselves credit for, and that the prospective students might think that they have. So what we saw in the research that you just referenced, Beth, was, you know, they might think they've got no influence, but actually if they can't take their child to an open day, then that means that child may not get to go to that open day, and that can have a huge influence then on the final decision.
Yeah, definitely. One more question, or do you think it's okay? So there's another question here about sort of what flexibility means, because I know there's a few mentions of flexibility earlier. So is that part-time versus full-time, hybrid, payment plans, things like that? Do you have any
Do you know
insight?
what I was referring to, Paul? Was that to a specific slide or question or point that we were discussing?
Oh, you're on mute, Paul.
Oh, you're on mute as well, Paul.
I don't. I'm trying to recall based on sort of when the question was asked, when it might have been, but
I think it was me. I think it was in reference to course information, and I think what we've seen in the past, prospective students, as I said in one of my earlier slides, they want to know that they're making the right decision. They want to know that they're choosing the right university and the right course for them. It's such a big decision, and showcasing if they have any flexibility just helps them to think, well, if I'm not making the right decision, at least I can change bits of it, or I can, you know, I've got lots of scope to explore different areas, either within this course or potentially, you know, moving to, you know, that side of things. That's what I was sort of referring to in terms of
that. Yeah. So in terms of, like, you know, whether offer making, the decisions made, whether it's set in stone and they can't, you know, change their mind later on, and there's flexibility throughout the process then as well. So yeah, and I think all universities will have a certain element of content and direction for both applicants and parents around that, and different offer making strategies as well, you know, in terms of flexibility around grades and acceptance and confirmation and clearing as well. So yeah, I think that's quite commonplace in terms of supporting with the definitions, and even if you change your mind later on, it's normally okay, you know, as long as you follow the rules and the deadlines.
Great.
I think we sort of try to cover that at open days when they sort of come to those subject talks, because it's one of those that every course is slightly different. Some are a lot more flexible than others. And I think then they have the opportunity to speak to those lecturers, or they speak to those students and really understand that. But yeah, again, I think most universities are kind of flexible, but it's not necessarily always communicated in marketing, because it can feel like, is that saying they've got free choice to do anything, which potentially we don't want everybody coming up and going, yeah, like I can do 6 different degrees, or I can change here and there, because logistically it wouldn't really work as a university if everybody came in the first year and then decided they were going to change a degree or change modulars. And so I think you have to be really careful about kind of communicating that without it being kind of set in stone. And I think one of those good approaches is having the academics in the open days kind of talk about their own courses and that ability to be flexible. And again, with those entry requirements, you know, them really speaking around the type of students they take, or having students there that are from different backgrounds, so that they get a feel of, again, this is me, oh gosh, they came in like this, and that could be me. So I think that's where we kind of do it, in that kind of closed space versus doing it from a marketing campaign.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much. So thank you. There's so many interesting questions in the Q&A that we haven't quite had time to get round to, but we will come back to you on all of those. But thank you so much.
Well, thanks, Bethany. And yeah, thanks everyone for attending. And yeah, mainly just a massive thank you to Jules and Gethin for being a part of our panel, and for just all your incredible insights.
You're welcome. Absolute pleasure.
Okay. Yeah, it's been fun. Thank you.
Thanks so much, all. All right.